Hi, Jennifer. Welcome back to the Finite Podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
It's great to have you here. And I say welcome back because you came on the show around this time last year to tell us why CMOs should be left in 2023. And that wasn't, I chose a bit of a controversial title for that one, but that was all about the chief market officer and how this can better define the changing role of marketing within leadership organizations. But that's not what we're going to talk about today. And now you're back to discuss a new report that Acquia, your company, has launched, and it's on digital accessibility. Before we find out more about that, as we always do, I'd love to get a recap on who you are and your background in marketing.
Sure, yeah. So Jen Griffin Smith, I have always been in technology marketing. Um, this is I think, my sixth CMO gig here at Acquia. What I love about what we do here is that I'm actually talking to marketers every day of the week because we offer a digital experience platform that allows marketers to build digital experiences that mean that audiences can engage with them in a more powerful way, and that we can hopefully help them improve their marketing ROI. And at a time like we're in today, it's what we're all trying to achieve. Budgets are not growing. We all feel like we have to do more with either the same amount or less. And we've got more and more audiences to reach out to. And so, how do we do that in a more powerful way using digital experience platforms?
Awesome. And coming back to the topic, where does digital accessibility come into that? Could you briefly outline what digital accessibility is?
Yes, yes. So digital accessibility pertains to how any kind of audience member can access and interact with your content and your digital experiences. Quite often we think about physical kind of accessibility. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is anything that is online. And I'm not sure that this topic is widely understood or even thought about. I know even myself, when I think about all of the marketing plans and strategies that I've built in the past, digital marketing has grown, obviously, especially as we came through a pandemic and the different tactics and things available to us. But I don't think that everybody has accessibility as part of their digital marketing strategy. In fact, I didn't until coming to Acquia, and we happen to have a solution, a tool that helps people manage that. And so I started to dig into, well, what does that mean? And what does it mean for marketers? And, is it really a thing? And is it powerful? And can it help me address a wider audience? And can it help me capture that audience? And does it mean that I'm serving my audience in a better way? And our research has really found that it does, right? We've even seen ourselves, by implementing some of these practices, a 2% increase in conversion. As we look at how do we spend our marketing dollars wisely to be able to achieve our objectives, I think that's really important. And it's a super important part of digital strategies.
Okay, great. It sounds really interesting and really important for marketers to know. We've got commercial goals to meet, and anything that helps us achieve those is very useful. So I take it that's why Acquia decided to do this report. It kind of fits with your own solution and your own internal strategy.
Yes, absolutely. And what we found is there are many reports out there for accessibility for companies and reaching out to companies and what they're doing. But what we wanted to do is actually go directly to those individuals that have accessibility needs. So the report is focused on 2,000 individuals that were self identified as having accessible needs. And we really wanted to understand how they felt, like how they felt interacting with these sites, and how they felt and what they did when they encountered sites and content that was not accessible.
Okay, great. So it's kind of consumer perspective, which is often more helpful for brands in the long run.
Yes, yes, and consumer across different ways. We think about consumer as, somebody buying something online, but we have clients across all different industry sectors with all different audiences, and some of those audiences can be citizens, students, patients, We have a lot of government, a lot of higher education, and so their KPI might not necessarily have a business metric or a revenue number. It might be engagement. And then we have a lot of B2C and a lot of B2B customers too. And so that audience can span a very different consumer.
Okay, great. Yeah. Our listeners are all B2B technology marketers like yourself. So it'd be great to lean on some of those B2B insights if you have any. And insights in general. Are there any findings that are surprising or really interesting that kind of stand out from other digital accessibility reports?
Yeah, I think what was interesting for me is to learn that actually we haven't really progressed in the last 5 years. And that's worrying. And that tells me that people aren't thinking about this as part of their digital marketing strategies. So when we looked at, how many people encounter problems, 89% of those we surveyed said they did encounter problems. And that's really high, right? That's high. And so then we asked, well, how does that make you feel? And it brought up words like angry, and then you think about, well, what's the impact of the brand on that? So there's one thing about, can I actually quantify, does that person go from one step to another? And then there's things about what's the more immeasurable impact on brand, right? And so what we looked at was, well, what do people do when they encounter these problems? When such a high number of people encounter accessibility problems, what will they do? And what was so interesting for me is that people said that they would turn to their family and friends and share that, right? And so that's negative brand impact. 20% of those respondents said they'd take to social media. And I think in a world where, referrals and social media is such, just it doesn't matter what kind of brand you are, it has a big impact on brand perception. That worried me, right? Because then you've got actually people doing something negative. Now, then there's people that actually would just say, well, I wouldn't tell a brand. And I think it was 60%, 62% said, I'd just go and find a competitive solution. So then you don't even know if there's been a problem. You're just losing people right there. Um, Gartner actually cited that companies would lose up to 17% of their audience by not having an accessible strategy. And so for me, I think about, gosh, 17%. We're all in this crazy busy digital landscape where we're all vying for the same attention of the same audience. And if by just improving my accessibility on my site and content, I can reach up to 17% of an audience, that's kind of a no-brainer, right? That was a real no-brainer. So yes, so very interesting statistics as it pertained to, one, a high amount of people that have issues with sites, and then what they do with that. The other thing that I think is interesting is when you look at, well, how many sites have accessible problems. And there's another great report out there. It was from WebAIM. It was the 2024 web accessibility report from WebAIM that said that 95.9% of the top 1 million websites in the world have accessibility issues. 95.9%. And in the last 5 years, that has only improved by 1.9%. And so I kind of feel like shame on us as marketers that we're not moving this quick enough in the right direction. And the impact is on us. The impact is on the fact that your consumers, your visitors can't consume the content and are therefore not going to convert. If you're a B2B marketer, you are measuring things like web traffic and conversions and how that flows through the normal funnel that we work through, but you're not measuring, well, how are you missing those people, right? And I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. It's an under-recognized um, causal relation when people see their conversions and traffic going down, and they probably don't think about this kind of stuff. And if they're seeing it drop or move by anywhere between 17% then you can probably claim why.
Yes.
And as brand reputation, you're right, becomes more important in this social democratized internet landscape, it's important to take preventative measures instead of just responding and reacting, and making sure you have someone on the end on the other end of that Twitter replying and making people feel seen, and making your customer service also more pressured, and etc. So we've got a lot of catching up to do, I guess. How do you think this relates to B2B in particular? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, well, definitely, because I'm a B2B marketer myself. And so we looked at even our own site and we looked at our own content and we said, right, what do we do? And there's one thing to measure. So one of our solutions enables you to measure the accessibility of your own site. And so I think the benchmark is around 86 to 89% accessible, is what kind of the benchmark would say. So we always want to be best in class. And so we look at, okay, how do we get our accessibility rating over 90%? And what are the things that we need to do that? And all with the view of how do we make sure that we're not losing people because we're spending a lot of money driving audiences to our site, right? As you know, we spend a lot of money on digital programs as B2B marketers, all with the aim of driving somebody to some landing page somewhere and having them consume that content. And hopefully you get to know who that person is, and you can look at their customer journey and you can look at how they're constantly consuming that content. Well, if they come in and they are not able to consume it, then how do you know, right? So it's things like, if you've got a lot of videos on your site, are you able to measure how long people actually view that video for? Do you put closed captions on those videos? Because a lot of people, with accessibility needs or not, need to be able to consume a video, and not necessarily, they may have a hearing impairment, but they may also be in an area where they can't have audio on. So actually, all of a sudden, you're opening up your audience. We're not just talking about up to that 17%. We're actually talking about people who are in all different kinds of situations that might not be able to have audio on. So there was simple things that we looked at, and actually, we have kind of a top 10 cheat sheet for people to think about. Where do I start? Like, where do I start with my site to look at some of the basic things that I can do? Right up to complicated audits that we can run that will actually show, every day kind of broken links or inaccessible content or inaccessible pages that need to have attention drawn to it and need to be fixed.
Great. Yeah, you've mentioned a few ways that marketers can tackle this already. I remember watching a really interesting talk about accessibility on social, and how even small details like putting a punctuation mark after emojis absolutely transforms the accessible experience for people with, yeah, accessibility issues.
Yeah.
Is there anything more? Oh, sorry. What were you going to say?
I was going to say there's so many more examples I can give. Just a couple that I found eye opening. Things like PDFs are notoriously bad for screen readers. They're not categorized and set up in a way that a screen reader can easily manage through a PDF. So if you have a lot of PDFs on your site, you need to remediate them all, right? Because then they'll be able to be read by a screen reader. But it's also things like color contrast. When you look at certain websites, anybody that has a color visual impairment, when you've just got things like red and green on a form, so you're a B2B marketer and you want to capture certain information on a form, actually having things like the check mark or the cross. So, because quite often when you fill a form in, it would change from red to green, for example, to say that you filled the form in correctly. But if you have any kind of colorblind impairness, you can't see that red and green. So even little things like putting a check mark against when it's correct, or a cross or a question mark, that can really help, right? So there are really small things, navigation, making navigation simple, making color contrast simple. Lots of sites you see from very creative marketing agencies are hugely inaccessible because there's so much information scrolling through, and you've got video overlaid with text, overlaid with different color. It makes it really hard for people to be able to concentrate. And so we're back to simplifying and simplifying so that people can capture the right information, so that screen readers can read through it. Um, things like alternative text descriptions are really important on visuals if people can't see the visual in there. And so there's just lots of small things you can do outside of things like broken links, which are just frustrating, right? So yeah, lots of things that opened my eyes that have actually been fascinating to work through and to see, well, what does that do to your conversion rate as you make these things, as you improve these things?
Yeah, definitely. Is there, you've kind of mentioned simplification more as a more kind of strategic level of thinking. Is there anything marketers can do to be more digitally accessible in their strategy, or do you think it's just a case of kind of understanding those little points of accessibility that you can use to improve your website?
Yeah, that's a great question because, and actually, we've just ran another piece of research with Forrester Consulting, which we're going to be publishing very soon, where we actually asked marketers about the challenges they face in building these digital experiences. Um, and what is very eye opening from that report is that um, 90% of the respondents said that their tech stack had grown, right? But that over half of them said that it was almost now too complex to be able to manage efficiently. And I think what's happened is as we've moved more into a digital marketing world, and we've got all these tools available to us, we are purchasing these tools and and using more, especially in the larger the organization, and these tools can actually be siloed across departments, but it's making it more complex, and it's making the ability to report on a customer journey even more complex because you've got so many touch points. And so one of the things that we talk to our customers about is, how can you simplify? What does the tech stack need to look like? And what is the analytics through a customer journey that you can see the impact that content is having? And what came out of it was interesting. I think it was, I'm just looking at my notes here because I was just reading this before we got on. 93% of that survey respondents said that they felt like if they could improve the relevancy and accessibility of their content, it would have a major impact on their marketing ROI, because content was a key piece of the challenges of this growing MarTech stack. And so it gets back to, as we all look at our budgets for next year in our spend, and I'd love to know from those people that have got giant budget increases coming, because I don't think there's many of us that have that. We look at, well, what does the tech stack look at, and what is important in that tech stack, and where can we get the best information on what our audiences are doing to help us know that we're spending in the right area. Um, so I think that simplicity and that understanding of the customer journey, and if we can make that journey easier for our customers, and we can create content that is going to move them along the journey in a more productive way that helps us be more efficient. And that's what we should be looking at.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned 17% drop in conversions with the lack of digital accessibility. Is there any kind of hard numbers on ROI drops?
Um, no, not yet. And I think it's something we work on. Although there is a stated McKinsey report that stated that, but this is more for consumer, that consumer companies lose 6.9 billion annually.
Mm.
Now, consumer companies tend to have higher traffic than a B2B site, but even if B2B were a third of that, that's a huge amount that is still being lost through inaccessible sites. And what we are trying to do is work with customers to look at, what did your metrics look like before and after? So there's one thing to measure the accessibility of your site, but what does your conversion rate look like, and how does that change, right? And how can we help you understand also the type of content consumption and where you should spend your time making certain content more accessible?
Yeah, definitely. We recently did a really popular event on measuring the commercial value of website content, and it was a lot of technical details. You'd probably need an analytics professional. It was a lot of kind of data warehousing and syncing your CRM with your analytics, and then syncing another thing. And yeah, very valuable, and I'm sure, yeah, you can actually measure that like journey that a user takes before they convert, and you can see the value of your content by dividing how much their value was by which pages they clicked on. So I can only imagine how interesting it would be to add digital accessibility to the mix, and use it as a kind of factor in your A/B testing to see which one
That's right.
converted higher.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm sure it would
And
always.
even just try it on some pages, right? Look at a couple of pages where you don't put your color contrast, and look at conversion rates of those pages, right? Or many companies have different websites or different landing sites that they use. Think about, you can play around with the navigation, and you can look at when PDFs aren't remediated, and various different angles, and see what impact that brings.
Yeah, definitely. Even if it's not in a structured report, you can still kind of get that qualitative like understanding of it just by looking at singular pieces of content for sure.
That's right.
Um, so I know you're kind of a digital experience expert. Is there any other tips that you have at the moment that brands should be thinking about to improve their customer experience?
Um, oh my gosh, there's so many, and there are many experts out there, by the way. Um, I would say progress over perfection, right? There is so much that we have to think about as digital marketers. Um, I try and boil it down to the simple fact of, where am I spending the money and what am I trying to achieve? I'm spending the money on content that is put on a site somewhere, and then digital programs to drive people to that site. And so if I can get better conversion off the sites and the content, that means I get higher productivity from what I'm spending on the digital channels. And so I'm not going to say less is more, because I think that's a little corny, but I do think that there is a notion sometimes in marketing to continue to create more and more content, as opposed to thinking about, how is your content being consumed? Are you getting the best consumption of that? Are you measuring that? And can you repurpose in different formats? If you're not measuring the accessibility of your site, you don't know, right? You're guessing you just need to make more content and put more content and more campaigns out there. But it may be that by measuring it and by making these small adjustments, you don't have to spend any more on those channels. You just have to concentrate on what you've got already and improving that. And there are many different ways we can help in having those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. That's a conversation that we've been having a lot at Finite. In the age of AI, when you can create content with the click of a button, how much do you create? What are you creating? Where does it go? You're seeing these brands, especially in B2B, which is kind of a new phenomenon, invest so much in creative to build that resonance. So you're suggesting that this is a also hugely beneficial to that customer experience perspective as well.
It's hugely beneficial. Um, and by the way, when we talk about customer experience, we're not just talking about marketing programs being accessible, right? We're talking about knowledge bases, right? We're talking about all the ways in which your customers engage with you throughout their lifetime of being a customer, and the support sites that they come to, um, and the places they come for other parts of tech that they might want to integrate. Like all of those sites, we're not just talking about the commercial website where we're trying to capture, hopefully, leads and have conversations. We're talking about customer sites, and what does it look like to engage with those sites, and is that improving NPS, and can people find what they need easily? It, it's not just about achieving our marketing goals, it's about achieving our customer retention and satisfaction goals.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is reminding me of kind of what we talked about last time, all of these little moving parts in the digital experience and customer experience part that you kind of have to all like simplify and streamline as a marketer, but sometimes that gets the better of you, I guess.
Yeah, and it's why when the last time we spoke, we talked about chief market officer, and for me, it's about the ability for me and my team to connect everything. It's not just about promotional marketing, because marketing is every touch point that a customer has, whether they're a new customer or an existing customer. And there are so many teams in the business that deal with that life cycle of the customer. We spend a lot of time in thinking about which teams touch those customers and how are we building digital experiences that are connected.
Exactly. Fabulous. So we only have time for one more question, unfortunately. But I think you mentioned, was it 1% of websites have increased their digital accessibility in the past 5 years? Was it?
1.9% growth in the top 1 million websites, yes.
Okay, great. So hopefully, with podcasts like these and increasing content on digital accessibility, that might change in the future, hopefully, the near future. Do you think it will for the remainder of 2024 and into 2025? How do you see digital accessibility evolving?
Yes, I think it has to. It has to. Now, one thing is going to drive us that we haven't talked about, which is regulation. So, for example, the EU is going to publish an act, and I believe it will be in effect from 2025, which will impact all 27 member states when it comes to web accessibility. So, there are many, many organizations and countries that are just going to have to do it because they're going to have to be compliant, and they run the risk of fines. I mean, that's one part of it. In the US, there are certain regulations, but you find that each state, and so it's important as marketers to look at certain states have different regulations from others. And I think we're going to see more of that regulation come into play. And what that means for us as marketers is we're going to have to keep up with those regulations. And so part of this is just doing the right thing and just being able to say that we're compliant and avoid those, the risk and the fines. But the other part of it is the right thing to do. We have audiences all over the world with all different kind of abilities, and it is the right for everybody to be able to use websites in the same way and access content in the same way. And so really we have to look at this as it is our responsibility as digital marketers in this age to be able to offer up the ability for everybody to be able to consume your information.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are some really nice points to end on and some tangible advice that marketers can do today or tomorrow after they listen to this is have a bit of empathy, think about people who need digital accessibility and the fact that they need information and knowledge too, and B2B tech products, by the way, and also to have a look at their states or their countries' regulations on digital accessibility. So thank you so much, Jennifer. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Great topic. Thank you.